Much needed and long overdue family vacation in Wisconsin, his home turf. And so I get the great pleasure of welcoming you and sharing a few opening remarks at this White House Faith-Based and Community Initiative Roundtable. Compassion in Action Roundtable is what we call them. And this is the 7th such event. And each one has really represented a strange blending of burden and hope. We are here because we're burdened by the raw facts of this world. That 2 out of 3 individuals who are released from prison will end up being rearrested for a new crime within 3 years of release. That in sub-Saharan Africa, that every 30 seconds, a child dies of malaria, which is a thoroughly treatable disease. That, as our best estimates tell us, more than 700,000 of our fellow Americans are homeless on any given night. And these numbers weigh heavily upon us, and those of us who are here, if we choose to engage them, feel a sense of burden, a sense of ache, a sense of heavy responsibility in these realities. And yet at the same time, we're here because of hope. We really believe that we can make a difference. We believe that when we knit together the very best of American ingenuity with the best of American compassion, that we really can do better for our neighbors in need. And that's the order of business here today, to place the very heavy burden, the needs of those of our fellow Americans who go without homes and very often many of the other things that they so desperately need, to place those needs right alongside the innovation and creative partnerships and the people that are making a real difference at meeting these needs. We're tremendously honored to have Secretary Alphonso Jackson with us today, and we'll hear from him in just a few minutes. We're also very fortunate to have Paul Smits, who is a decorated veteran as well as a real leader at the Veterans Housing Authority. We also have Bob Young, who the illustrious former mayor who now helps Secretary Jackson with leadership at HUD. And it's also particularly good to have Philip Mangano, who's the executive director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. This month actually marks the 20th anniversary of the date that President Reagan signed the Stuart B. McKinney Homeless Assistance Act. And it was this act that created the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. And as many of you know, President Bush has placed a huge premium on reinvigorating this council and also extending its mission to end chronic homelessness. It was Philip, actually, that encouraged us to make July the month that we host this roundtable to honor the anniversary. And of course, alongside these government leaders are some of America's great social entrepreneurs, both on the panels that we'll hear from as well as in the more comfortable chairs out here. And these are the people who on a daily basis are bringing together caring hearts with brilliant ideas to solve real-world problems. And ultimately, that is what the faith-based and community initiative is all about, real results for our neighbors in need. We don't in any way wish to disparage more traditional government efforts, but we do believe that government can always do better for our neighbors in need when we're joining with every willing partner, whether faith-based or secular, large or small. And government absolutely has resources and a reach that nothing else can match. But there's also nothing that can compare to the organizations that share the same zip codes as the challenges that they're addressing, that draw upon scores of dedicated volunteers, that answer the phone often after most government employees have gone home for the night, that have a deep personal commitment to the individuals that they're serving. This is the vision of the Faith-Based and Community Initiative, pairing the unique strengths of government with the unique strengths of faith-based and community organizations that are active all over our country. So today, we not only want to highlight these effective partnerships and creativity, but also, and equally importantly, to think seriously together about how they can be extended. So to start this discussion off, it is my great privilege to introduce to you Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Alphonso Jackson. If you'll look at his bio in the program, you'll see that Secretary Jackson has a type of record of accomplishment and impact for good that some of us slightly younger folks would dream of someday having. That's right. And his service has ranged from being an assistant professor at the University of Missouri to being the president of a $13 billion electric utility company, as well as extensive public sector leadership in the area of housing. But despite this very towering record, I would say that what is most impressive of all is that he is a man who cares deeply about people, particularly people that have been ignored and marginalized and pushed to the side. He's been a great champion of the Faith-Based and Community Initiative at HUD, not only because the president cares deeply about it, but because he cares deeply about making a real difference in the lives of people in need. Secretary Jackson, it is a tremendous honor to have you here.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Jeff, thank you so much for the kind introduction. But if most people look at my resume, they probably said I couldn't keep a job. I am pleased to be here today. Mother Teresa said that poverty is not only being hungry, naked, or homeless, that poverty of being unwanted, unloved, uncared for is the greatest poverty. I want to say thank you very much for caring about Americans who find themselves without a home, but never without hope because of your great work. Our President Bush has set some very worthy goals: ending chronic homelessness and moving homeless families and individuals into permanent homes. These roundtables that Jed talked about will enhance our abilities to meet these goals, and they will better equip the army of compassion to serve those who need life's basic needs. And I can tell you that shelter is one of the most important. But providing a roof over one's head is just not enough. The people in this room know that very well. I can say honestly that you are helping to ensure that homelessness in America will be stopped. That many of the people that are homeless will have access to services such as medical, mental health treatment, and that they know about the many resources that will be available to them. You are helping homeless persons learn skills that can lead to better employment and greater independence. You're working to kick drugs and alcohol habits that can overtake the soul and replace them with a more powerful force. Whatever your role, together, we're sending the message that homelessness is a challenge that can be solved. You have not shrugged your shoulders, but you're shouldering the load. And you're setting, in my mind, a fine example of what can be accomplished. And I will say this today, that the President and I appreciate the positive role that government plays in this process. Jeb alluded that 20 years ago, President Ronald Reagan signed the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. At that time, it provided urgent needs for food, health care, housing that were available in many communities, that were unavailable in many communities. But in signing that bill, government can play a role, but the people closest to those people who are suffering can make things happen. In 1994, HUD added another vital piece called continuum care. The strategy was to provide local coordination so that we can identify the gaps in services and fill them with help from the local communities. This year alone, Continuum Care Program has helped more than 315,000 persons per year receive housing and supportive services. Nearly 150,000 formerly homeless persons with disabilities are currently living in permanent supportive environments. But I am proud of the fact that 86% more people are employed when leaving our projects than when they arrive. I could say HUD is unlocking the door, but I will say that together we are unlocking the doors for all Americans. And I want to say that you deserve the credit. And I mean that sincerely. You deserve the credit. You know how important it is that people not just get by one day more, but they must see a clearer, brighter tomorrow. When nonprofits and faith-based providers join forces with local political leaders, the result is a powerful change in the way that homeless families and individuals are served. Yes, HUD awards $258 million in faith-based organization last year. But no other, and I will say this because it's very important, and no other federal agency came close to us. Nonprofit and faith-based groups make up nearly 2/3 of HUD's continuing care grants. In my mind, faith-based programs funded by HUD serve more than 125,000 homeless individuals and families. We know that government, no matter how well-intentioned or well-funded, cannot do it alone. And we appreciate the faith in God is matched by the faith in your fellow man. See, I'm of the opinion of something that my mom and dad taught me years ago. See, and when you're the last of 12 kids, you get all the wisdom the other 11 miss. And I got a lot of wisdom. And my mom used to say, well, I better add some levity to this. I know exactly what you're thinking. Sometimes a person said to me once, I gave that and said that part. They said, I heard them in the audience, they said, boy, his mom and dad spent a lot of time in bed. But they loved each other too. And Jed, I will tell you, I'm sure glad they spent that last time, otherwise I wouldn't be here talking to you. But seriously, my mom taught me something that I think is very important. She says, too often people believe that church is only on Sunday and faith is only on Sunday. And they go the next 6 days without praying, without talking, without helping anyone. Then they come back Sunday. So she said, faith is an experience, how you live it, how you practice it. We can talk about the funding that occurred and how it's increased since President Bush has been president, and it has. Most people don't understand that since 2001, HUD has awarded more than $9 billion to support thousands of local housing and service programs throughout the nation. And this year we're seeking a record $1.6 billion. But I will tell you, as my mother used to say, we're concerned less with input, but more with the outcome. See, we should be working to reduce the time between the grant request and the dollars allocated to you to do your job. Now, of course, this is a two-way street. We want states, cities, communities to use the federal funds promptly and report back to us what is being accomplished with that money. But let me say this again. Church does not end, faith does not end on Sunday. We need to go back to our communities and identify new ways to solve old problems. When some things work, we should spread the word. And I'm one that believes that if you take someone's idea and use it in your community, it's the greatest form of flattery, not stillery. And I like to use examples that you can use. One example that I use consistently is where the LA Police Department Safe City Initiatives has helped a number of people dying on Skid Row by half, cut it by half. Or the city of Denver, where a number of chronic homeless has fallen dramatically since 2005. That's because of the continuum care that we see. But again, this is good news, but it is not something that HUD has done. For us to end homelessness, we must better understand it and measure it. Earlier this year, HUD released the first annual homeless assessment report to Congress. It is our state-of-the-art attempt to measure homelessness over time. What we found was about 750,000 persons living in emergency shelters, transitional housing, and on the streets on any given night. Of this, 1/4 can be called chronic homelessness. The count will be a tremendous help to you as community leaders, as state leaders, as local leaders, not to mention our friends on Capitol Hill who have some good ideas for themselves. But let me share this with you. If you share your ideas with our friends on Capitol Hill, things will get done. A lot of times I go to Capitol Hill and they think it's for self-preservation, and they don't listen that well. But I think when you come here and go up on the Hill, you can make a difference. See, sometimes when I'm out in public, I say that Washington, D.C. is 65 square miles surrounded by reality, because there's not much reality here. And that's why I spend a lot of time out in the community, because I believe that if we can find a solution, and I agree with President Bush that we can, I believe we can cure the problem of homelessness in this country. We've worked with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and they're on board. A number of governors are on board. But I will tell you this, that as we go forward, we must remember that homelessness is not just a problem itself, but a symptom of a larger problem. Therefore, we cannot just adopt a one and done strategy like a lot of times we want to do. Our commitment must be comprehensive, and it must be for the long haul. Homelessness are not some faceless others. They are our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, and as my mother would say, but for the grace of God, that could be me, or could be us. Before we can solve the problem, we must put a face on the problem. And we must open our hearts to the people we're trying to help. That is what you have to all do, and do it well. And I'm convinced that you will do it. See, I will close simply with this. I said earlier, when you're the last of 12, you get the wisdom. My mom and dad taught me something that has stayed with me. And I recite it quite frequently. And it's very simple, and I hope you will take it with you in your effort to help those who are less fortunate and homeless. It is that as human beings, we come into this world with nothing on. We're going to leave out of this world with nothing on. All that matters is how well we treat, respect, and serve people in between. That should be your legacy. And if you do that well, God will shower you with great blessings. And don't be afraid to say God will shower you with great blessings. Amen. See, I am pleased to work for President Bush, a man of God, who believes that it is our responsibility, with us being very fortunate in this room, to serve, protect, and take care of those who are less fortunate. I give you my pledge today that we will do everything in our power as a department to work with you and for you to change the quality of life for those who are less fortunate than we are. God bless you all, and God bless our country. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Okay, so can I invite up Mayor Young and the panel there with him? Great. Okay, and this will be looking at the Unlocking Doors initiative, which has been led by HUD and Secretary Jackson and the team there.
Jed, thank you very much for the opportunity for HUD to participate today. I am always impressed when the Secretary speaks, not because he's my boss, but because he's someone who genuinely believes in the mission of HUD and the work that we do day in and day out, and it's a pleasure to serve him. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce a couple of people from the faith-based office at HUD who are here today, and if you haven't met them yet, please do so before you leave. Ana Maria Ferreras, who is the director, and B.J. Douglas, who is in the office too. Many of you have seen B.J. at grant writing training, so you want to definitely get to know B.J. We want to talk a little bit about the Unlocking Doors initiative, which we have at HUD. And a door is an interesting thing. A door can be a barrier to something, or a door can be a gateway to opportunity. And we like to think of unlocking doors as unlocking gateways to opportunity. The Unlocking Doors initiative in HUD is something that is used to highlight and promote successful local strategies for involving faith-based and community organizations in developing affordable housing plans and promoting home ownership. And we work directly with the Office of the Mayor. If there's a center of energy, a center of power in a community, if there's a bully pulpit in the community, if there's an office that can make things happen, can create partnerships, that can leverage resources, it's the Office of the Mayor. And if you're not engaged with your mayor, you need to go back and meet your mayor when you get home. That's all I can tell you. Having been a mayor for 6.5 years and having people come and unlock my doors, you can certainly make a difference when you engage your local political leadership. But through the Unlocking Doors initiative, it's a two-part strategy. What we do is work with the mayors and the nonprofits and faith-based groups that they work with to identify the best practices in this country to get people into clean, decent, safe, and affordable housing. And then we showcase those best practices. And then the other side of it is HUD presents the technical assistance to help the communities and to help those organizations to achieve the work, to achieve the mission that they're engaged in. We couldn't do it without the nonprofit, the faith-based groups. We couldn't do it without the support of the local political leadership. And today what we're going to do is hear two examples of how partnerships with City Hall, with local government, with faith-based and community organizations are truly making a difference in two cities. And it's really interesting that we have two communities of dramatically different sizes, different influence, different issues.
That's true.
But you can see how the mission of this translates from one community to the next. I'm going to introduce both of our presenters and then let them present. Sitting next to me is the Reverend Douglas Nelson. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Levitical Network. He began working while he was in high school in the office of Mayor Tom Bradley out in Los Angeles. He's now the advisor on faith-based, he's the faith-based liaison for the current mayor of Los Angeles. He's also the Chief Executive Officer of the Levitical Network, which is a for-profit company which he founded. And then Susan Smith is with us from Hickory, North Carolina. Now, she can tell you about furniture, but we're not going to talk about that today. She is the Assistant Executive Director of Exodus Homes. She has been working in human services for 34 years. She's deeply committed to Exodus, the movement that strives to provide people a way out of the bondage of drug addiction, alcoholism, and incarceration. And in 2007, Susan received the prestigious Rotary Presidential Citation for meritorious service. Now, they've put a clock on us today, and we do want to allow some time for your questions. So we're going to get a brief overview from Pastor Nelson and from Ms. Smith, and then we'll open it up for questions from those of you who are assembled today. Pastor?
Thank you, Bob. I do want to say that I'm formerly the liaison for faith-based relations in Mayor Villaraigosa's office. I did have the pleasure of serving him for more than 2.5 years. I worked in Council District 14 with him prior to his election, and then worked with him in the mayor's office as well as on his campaign, and then left the mayor's office to start the Levitical Network. The wonderful Unlocking Doors initiative that took place, I want to thank certainly HUD's office for assisting us and working with us. I believe it was a very successful event. We brought a number of individuals together on January 24th to talk about the different strategies of housing development and also the different types of development that can take place by faith-based organizations. We brought over 8 different expert organizations that included the Menorah Housing Foundation. It included New Economics for Women. It included City of Refuge Church led by Bishop Noel Jones. It included St. Paul Baptist Church, a very old church in the Los Angeles community. West Angeles Church, which many of you are probably familiar with Bishop Blake, who is now the prelate bishop of the Church of God in Christ. SRO Housing, which I know Phil was recently out to Los Angeles to visit, a community of friends, as well as we partnered with the University of Southern California and their economic development department. What happened in the day of the Unlocking Door initiative and symposium was about 75 to 80 individuals came together. We heard from these experts talk about homeless housing, talk about affordable housing, talk about market rate housing, and they talked about the development of mixed use, mixed income, and commercial development. We have some really wonderful examples that took place. For example, the New Economics for Women, which is a largely Latina organization that was started some 20 years ago by 3 Latina women in Los Angeles. They have developed the first partnership with Los Angeles Unified School District to build a charter school as well as housing on that same complex. This was an example of a commercial development that has not taken place in Los Angeles before. And now what's happened is LAUSD has now sought these women out and said, can we use your development agreement that you worked with our predecessors and use that going forward as we begin to develop more schools throughout the Los Angeles area. West Angeles and City of Refuge. City of Refuge, along with Bishop Noel Jones, just announced recently that he's doing a $100 million development in South Central Los Angeles, or South Los Angeles as we now call it. And that particular development will include homeless housing. It will include market rate housing. It will include affordable housing for seniors, and also a recreation center for those individuals. West Angeles Church is looking to develop 7 acres of property that they own along the Crenshaw corridor, which is straight down the center of the Los Angeles corridor. It is sort of the African America epicenter in Los Angeles. West Angeles Church happens to own the most property along that area, and they're proposing a more than $150 million development along there that will include market rate developments as well as mixed-use development with retail along that commercial corridor and some other church development as well. So what happened from this, what resulted from this, is that the University of Southern California and myself have partnered to pull together a report that we plan on releasing later in the year. What we're going to do is pull all of these expert testimonies, if you will, on how you build these developments, how do you do the entitlements, what's needed. There are some really wonderful, innovative things that's taking place in Los Angeles. I'd like to tell you that there are some great impediments to what's happening, and I think we all know those, but there is a strata of experiences with regard to these faith-based institutions. If you hear me and feel me, say amen, because I'm a minister. What's happening is that there are certain organizations, as they start, they obviously need the legal assistance to just get started and get formed. These are those organizations that are within their infancy. Then there are those organizations that, of course, need the financial and administrative backing and support, which is also another impediment to doing these kinds of developments. It's great to have the desire and it's great to have the interest to do it, but if you don't have those things in place, standing as I formerly served as a philanthropic officer giving money away to nonprofits in Southern California for 7 years, and I could tell you how many proposals I saw go through my office from nonprofits, and these nonprofits didn't have the wherewithal and the capacity, and that capacity is still needing to be developed in certain nonprofits, as we all know, and we you know, I want to just thank you for the Compassion Capital funds that are going to, you know, develop this capacity in certain organizations. I would have liked the proposal that I submitted through the City of Los Angeles to have been funded, but I think I now have an opportunity with my organization. But having said that, there's some communication and marketing impediments. There's capacities that need to be developed there. And then what communication and marketing does, once you develop these three capacities, that's the legal capacity and understanding the structure that you need when you do these developments, understanding the finance and administrative structure that you need, and then the communication and marketing, then these organizations can go ahead and begin to make the call to their community about why we need to respond. Certainly the Bible tells us in my faith tradition in Matthew 25 that when I was hungry, did you feed me? That's what Christ will say when he returns. When I was homeless, did you provide a home for me? Well, what happens then is that these organizations will be able to make that call. They will be able to take the NOT out of NIMBYism, and they will invite people back into their backyards and invite them into their homes and then begin to do the developments that we need. And I'd like to thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Pastor. Susan?
And now for something completely different. Good afternoons and greetings on behalf of Reverend Reggie Longcrier, who is the Executive Director of Exodus Homes, the staff and residents of Exodus Homes, and the mission and the members of Exodus Missionary Outreach Church. I want to say that Pastor Longcrier is pastor of our church. I'm one of the ministers in the church. He is the Executive Director of Exodus Homes. I'm the Assistant Executive Director, and he's the chaplain of the local prison at Catawba Correctional Center, and I am on the board of Catawba Prison Ministries, and we represent what we call the Exodus movement, which has three components. It has the church, it has the nonprofit housing program, and it has the prison ministry, and all three components work together synergistically, helping bring people out of the bondage of drug and alcohol addiction and incarceration. And 10 years ago, a small group of us as a new church were meeting in a funeral home chapel planning how we would create a 501c3 nonprofit to provide faith-based supportive housing for homeless recovering addicts, alcoholics, and formerly incarcerated people. As a new non-denominational multi-ethnic congregation, we had no money, we had no property, but we did have faith in God and in our community that we would be able to meet this urgent need. And today our church is bursting at the seams in our own church home, and our nonprofit owns 6 of our 9 facilities, providing 85 beds of faith-based supportive housing in 4 neighborhoods in Hickory, North Carolina.
Amen.
Amen, yeah. We are honored to be featured in the HUD Unlocking Doors Initiative program today. Thank you, BJ, for this invitation. Just to give you a little background, as a new church, as soon as we announced our plans to create this sort of housing in our community in 1998, we were immediately inundated with a tidal wave of people begging for our help coming out of treatment centers, hospitals, homeless shelters, jails, prisons, and we also experienced tremendous opposition from our community. We don't want you here. Why do you have to do this? Who do you think you are? What makes you think you can do this? Why can't you do it someplace else? So to counter the opposition and create the housing that we needed, we partnered with HUD and other funders to pair urban renewal with the development of faith-based supportive housing in our community. Our handout in your packet, which, by the way, I don't know why it's missing our program brochure about Exodus Homes. I'm hoping that we'll be able to pass those out before you go. If you do have them, that's good. Shows how, and this handout has many different kinds of graphs and information for your review, shows how CDBG funds through the City of Hickory and 2 kinds of home funds through the Western Piedmont Council of Governments provided 48% of the funding that we needed to buy 6 vacant boarded up properties, 2 apartment complexes, 1 apartment building, and 3 houses. These properties were in low income areas where residents struggle with serious crime and substance abuse issues. Over time, our partnership with HUD through the City of Hickory and the Western Piedmont Council of Governments worked together with the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency's housing trust funds, which are appropriated by our state legislature, the Bank of Granite, Carpenter Foundation, and a private donor to transform these public nuisance properties into decent, energy-efficient housing for homeless recovering people returning to our communities. Our ability to bring resources into our community for this purpose made creating our faith-based supportive housing program possible and turned the tide of opposition into a groundswell of support for our organization. NIMBY, or the Not in My Backyard opposition to supportive housing for homeless people, disappears when you are transforming declining neighborhoods as you go. A unique feature of our program is that it is primarily funded and operated by the residents themselves. Our motto is, we're here to carry the message of recovery, not the addict, and we're here to give you a hand, not a handout. We receive $12,000 of HUD CDBG public service dollars through the City of Hickory annually to support employment and transportation services that help our residents find full-time jobs so they can pay for the services that they are receiving. These employment and transportation services are primarily provided by residents for residents, and last year we generated $353,000 in resident program fees from the wages of jobs that we helped them obtain. Using $12,000 of HUD CDBG public service funds to generate $353,000, or 64% of our operating budget, is a huge return on the federal investment in our effort to help homeless people become productive tax-paying citizens. We also receive HUD emergency shelter grant funds through the state to help offset 50% of our expenses for utilities, and HUD CDBG public service funds and emergency shelter grant funds together represent 9% of our total operating budget and provide that consistent the support that we need to help leverage other funds and programs to help make ends meet. This year we launched Exodus Works, a social enterprise program to generate funds by employing our residents in small business services to the community. So through supporting our work, HUD is saving tax dollars in our community because it costs $25,000 for a prison bed annually in the state of North Carolina. It costs $7,400 annually for a bed at Exodus Homes. You do the math. That's a bargain. And these people are paying taxes.
We might have to send our prisoners to your...
Listen, I'm telling you, we do an excellent job of taking people straight from prison into our program and straight from treatment, homeless centers, hospitals. Send us you're tired, you're weary, those yearning to be free, and we want to help them. Over time, we learned that some residents desire to live in a recovery community long term, and for some, it is their permanent home. Therefore, permanent supportive housing has sprung up amidst transitional supportive housing, and we appreciate the maturity and the leadership our permanent residents bring to the recovery community. 20% of our beds are permanent, and they are scattered throughout the 9 locations. A bed is classified permanent when the resident who lives in it passes the 2-year mark. Our fee system and unique permanent housing arrangement has required some tedious bookkeeping modifications to satisfy HUD funding restrictions, but we believe it's worth it. We had to fight for the right to be free. We did. The practical value of one addict helping another is without parallel, and the presence of permanent residents among those with less than 2 years helps create the self-government system that makes our program possible. Paying for services received is good for recovering people, and the highest honor at Exodus Homes is to be a zero balance or paid-up resident. 2 federal funding barriers we have encountered come as a result of our unique program design. We are not in a landlord-tenant relationship with our residents, and we are not a mental health license program. To change either one of these is unnecessary and would fundamentally alter the foundation of our effectiveness, so we choose to remain as we are in the best interest of our residents. We ask that faith-based programs be given some room to help create new fundable service definitions in supportive housing for homeless recovering people. The holistic, comprehensive array of services in our program is outstanding, and as some of our handouts will reflect, and while the faith-based component is optional, it is the main reason that most homeless recovering people come to Exodus Homes. Nothing else has worked. Treatment didn't work, the street didn't work, the shelter didn't work, prison didn't work, jail didn't work. So why not try God? What have you got to lose? We honor all faith groups, we respect all faith groups, and we welcome all people, and are well known for our open-minded and inclusive approach to ministry. One of the most beneficial effects of our program for the community has been the crime reduction in all 4 neighborhoods where our programs are located. The Hickory Police Department considers us the quintessential, and the city of Hickory, might I add, considers us the quintessential grassroots faith-based organization that met an identified need in the community. And for our community policing, the police did run the statistics and shows that we have affected a 90% reduction in total calls for service in our primary campus area where we have 6 sites on the same street. The city is also pleased with our work, and so much so that they chose Exodus Homes as one of 3 grassroots organizations featured in their application for the coveted title of All-America City from the National Civic League. In June, we went with the city officials to Anaheim, California to tell our story, and we were thrilled to help bring back that prestigious award to Hickory. Yeah. Amen. Through Exodus Homes, HUD has helped unlock doors, help keep them open, and is bringing people and communities from disgrace to dignity. We struggle to survive because the best definition of supportive housing is that people who need to live in it cannot afford to fully pay for it. We hope that you will take a moment to review our materials in your packet and contact us if you would like to be a partner in this great work. We do have a 12-minute film that takes you to the heart and soul of everything that we are in the community, in the housing program, in the prison. We hope that you will take this home and watch it, share it with your friends. There is a brochure about our church. The church and the housing program are completely separate business entities, but they do work together very synergistically, are doing great things in our community. And I might add, in closing, that we have changed the stigma that comes with the term recovering addict, alcoholic, or ex-offender, and today neighborhoods are asking us, will you please bring an Exodus home to our neighborhood? And we believe that HUD has played a great part in that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Susan. We have about 10 minutes to entertain questions from those of you who are here with us today. We'd love to engage in a dialogue, talk a little bit about what we've heard and some of the challenges that you face and how perhaps some of the solutions that they have engaged in can apply where you live and where you work. I think one of the more significant things that we've heard is how they've been able to take the NIMBY in both cities, big and small, and turn it into opportunity. And I think when you see the business side of this, it's an easy sell for a community when you're redeveloping a community, you're lowering crime, you're creating taxpayers. Why not? That's the opportunity for your community. And then to take a holistic approach, and how can you take $12,000 from HUD and leverage that? How can you take a grant from a private foundation and leverage that and turn the resources over and over? That's truly unlocking doors. Yes, sir.
I would ask this for Susan. Could you explain a little bit to the wraparound services that you provide to the people that come to your homes?
Absolutely. In your packet, you have, okay. Well, the resident says 64% of everything is paid for by them, but we also do have, part of the United Way. And there is a breakdown of our budget here on the second page of your handout, which shows that we do have a fair amount of contributions, $80,000 last year. We have a lot of support in the community. We do have grants. We have the 9% from HUD. But the primary funding is from the residents themselves and the program fees that they pay. So between their program fees, the Exodus Works social enterprise component that we've started, and we're generating funds and private contributions, that's the bulk of our budget. Then comes the United Way and HUD to make up the rest. And we do have clinical partnerships with mental health in our community. All of our residents are referred to substance abuse treatment and complete treatment as part of their program at Exodus. All of our residents volunteer in the community. All of them are working, of course. And there is a breakdown of how they spend their week. The residents typical 1 to 12 months, and they spend a lot of time at work, a lot of time in their treatment, and Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Celebrate Recovery, other kinds of groups, faith-based activities, recreation, and volunteering. And so we do so many different kinds of partnerships, and that's one of the reasons we were chosen for the All-America City application. Just off the top of our head, we came up with 75 partners in the city, people who use our residents, people that partner with us for services. We don't want to recreate any service that's already existing in the community. We just try to link with them. And one of the most important things, of course, is in transportation. How do you get them there? We run vehicles 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, donated vehicles driven by the residents themselves all over the county. And we run a small transportation service to make all that happen.
The money from HUD, sponsor-based or project-based rental assistance, is that what you're getting from them in the way of support?
No, that's one of the things that we can't get because we're not landlords and they're not tenants. No, the HUD money that we get is, for the operating expenses is CDBG public service money. Each community is limited to 15% of their CDBG, and so we get $12,000, and we take that $12,000 and turn it around to $353,000.
Expand on why you think it's important not to be in a landlord-tenant relationship, and how do you deal with some of the difficult situations I'm sure you have to deal with it, like the rest of us do?
Yes. Well, one of the things that we guarantee to our residents and to the community is that we will have a drug and alcohol-free program. We must be able to guarantee that for the people who live there so that their comfort level is there, that where I live, I know that no one is going to be using around me, and for the community so they'll know where our facilities are located, that these are truly drug-free, alcohol-free programs. And so we must be able to test people on a random basis. We must be able to ask people to leave immediately if they do relapse. And this is for their own good. You know, a lot of people, they need that. They want to live somewhere where I know you're going to hold me accountable for being clean. So should someone relapse, we don't need to get into an eviction process that will take 30 days to get out them from the program, because during that 30 days while they're in a relapse state, they will ruin the recovery environment for everyone else. And so we just believe that it's just best that we not get into that relationship, so that we do have you are here at our invitation and you will be asked to leave at our invitation. But if you're living right, you can live here, you know, you can call it home. It can be your permanent home. You just cannot use drugs or alcohol, and you must abide by, you know, just certain rules and regulations. And the longer you're in the program, the more freedom you have. And when you're on the top level, you're pretty much on your own independent living, but we do expect you to live drug and alcohol free.
Thank you. Ma'am?
I have two questions. One, we opened up a reintegration program as well in Hawaii recently, and we have two challenges. One, for those individuals coming directly from the prison to us, they don't qualify as being homeless because they weren't on the street.
That's right.
One.
Right.
How do you folks work around that? The second issue is most of our men and women returning to the community, we get them jobs, but they're really low-paying jobs. And although our housing, our resident living quarters, we charge them program fees as well. We started off with $450 a month, and they couldn't make it. So we're running at a deficit in that program because of that. Now, as they graduate to, you know, better employment, that will change. So how did you work around those two issues? From the gate to us?
Well, first of all, when they're leaving prison, if they look at a home plan that is not viable, if I go back there, I'm going to relapse. If I go back there, I'm going to fall right back into the same behavior that put me in prison to begin with. They can't go back there. That's the way we look at it in North Carolina. You can't go there. You have to go someplace else, and so therefore, I have nowhere to go, and they are homeless. That in our state, we do accept that as a homeless condition, and the programmer within the prison system says this person does not have the support system necessary for housing when they leave. Because if we're honest, we know if they go back there, what's going to happen? They have no support, and they are surrounded by the same problem that took them to prison to begin with. The second question is that thank God there's a God in a faith-based operation, because you know we never know how we're going to pay the bills, but the truth is that that's one of the reasons it's good for people to stay as long as they need to. First a job, any job, then a better job, then a career, and it takes quite a while for people to work their way up to a living wage, but when you have a large enough community with enough people who've made it and are staying, then they more or less subsidize the stay of the ones who are just getting there and can't pay their full program fee. And we do every resident does accrue an arrears account, and over time they pay that up. And when you get to zero, we hang a huge banner in the parking lot and give you a big shout out and celebrate you in church. We make the biggest deal out of it you can imagine, because it is possible for people to get caught up, but it takes a while. You know, it's not something that happens overnight, so that's why you have to have a lot of creative partnerships to get the food for free, the furniture for free, the gasoline for free.
May I respond to that? Go ahead. While I was in the mayor's office, I had the pleasure of working with Imago, which is an entity of the Union Rescue Mission. And they were doing reentry programs throughout Los Angeles, as well as working with a number of other nonprofit organizations. I think Yvette was a member of that staff, and I'm glad to see her here as well today. They had some of the same issues, but they actually said, too, that the individuals were indeed homeless, because if you asked them if they could go home or from whence they came, or rather from whence they were picked up, they told you they could not. And so that declared that they were indeed homeless, one. Secondly, with regard to helping to finance these kinds of operations, it does take some creative entrepreneurial energy. You certainly have to go, and beat down every door, perhaps to, find dollars. It's miraculous to hear what they've been able to do with $12,000, but that's what you have to do. You got to go out and turn over every stone and find out if you can, raise dollars for these programs. Invariably, as you're discovering, the actual participants will help to raise money for the programs. There's a wonderful example that Union Rescue Mission does. They have individuals that they call their stars, and I might be mispronouncing this, but these individuals are individuals who graduated from the Union Rescue Mission program, have come back and have shown themselves to be good community citizens. There's one gentleman by the name of Vernon Davis, who I think is his name. I've met him a couple of times. This gentleman began tithing while in Union Rescue Mission, because he learned while in Union Rescue Mission that tithing was something that God would indeed bless him if he did that. So he took when he first started, his $1 a week check and tithed 10 cents into Union Rescue Mission. Over the last 20 years, this gentleman has tithed more than $40,000 to Union Rescue Mission, only because he was taught, and we could ask Yvette, but he was taught essentially how to tithe, and he was taught the importance in tithing of managing his money, and he became then a great spokesperson for the program, and he also speaks to then reentry and how individuals get back to the lifestyles that they intend to lead, without drugs and alcohol abuse.
That's great. Well, the clock has caught us. We want to stay on time, but we want to thank Reverend Nelson and Ms. Smith for their presentations, and they will be here, so if you have some other questions, please see them when we conclude today. I always like to have a takeaway when you go to a meeting, and let me just ask a question of the group here. How many of you come from a city or a county that has an office of faith-based or community initiatives that runs out of the mayor's office? Well, let me give you something you can take back to your mayor. When I was mayor of our city, we wanted to have an office of community services and help faith-based and nonprofits to expand their capacity. So we didn't have the money to do it, and we got a VISTA volunteer. We got the federal government to pay for that person for 3 years to come in and establish that office and expand the capacity of nonprofits and faith-based in our city. So go back to your mayor and talk to him about someone to assist your nonprofits. And if he says, well, we don't have it in the budget to do, say, well, let's get a VISTA volunteer because it won't cost you anything. All you need is a desk and a computer and put the person to work. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. And we have, Jed, you have more program to follow. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks very much, each of you. That was great. Next, we're going to invite Paul Smits to come forward. And Paul, as I mentioned earlier, is a decorated military veteran. He's also a 34-year veteran of the Department of Veterans Affairs, has held a wide range of roles, and he currently manages the day-to-day operations of the Veterans Health Administration grant and per diem program, as well as a wide range of other things that have real impact in the lives of homeless veterans. So, Paul, please come forward.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here amongst all of you because you put the face on services to homeless throughout the country. You are there for them. You are the people who restore hope. You are the people who are out there serving every day and changing lives. So thank you, and it's good to be with you. This is the 20th anniversary of VA's specialized programs for homeless, and so we're pleased with that. We feel that the VA has a very positive story to tell about our services to homeless veterans. It's a very difficult problem. There are many homeless veterans, but we are reducing the numbers of homeless veterans across the country, and that's because we're in an active partnership with you, the faith-based organizations, the other federal agencies, the state governments, and without you, the community organizations and the faith-based organizations, we would not be successful. So it's a tribute to all of you that have partnered with us across the country that we've actually been able to reduce the numbers of homeless veterans. There are a lot of homeless veterans today. Currently, we estimate that there are 195,000 homeless veterans in the country. That's down from our original estimates of when we began this 20 years ago. There were 250,000 to 300,000. So these programs work. They do pay off. And we've been able to reduce numbers. The primary goal of all of our programs, and we have a number of programs for homeless veterans, is to return homeless veterans to self-sufficiency and stable living that is as independent as possible. We couldn't do it without you. I'll emphasize again. This is a partnership with the community. This is a partnership with community and faith-based organizations. Our administration and the VA has a substantial commitment. Caring for homeless veterans is costly. They need health care. They need mental health care. They need care for substance abuse. This year, the VA expects to spend $1.5 billion on the care alone of homeless veterans. $266 million of that will go into specialized programs for homeless veterans. Next year, that funding we anticipate will increase to $1.6 billion and $287 million to specialized programs. I want to tell you about just a few of our programs, some of our bigger programs that serve homeless veterans. The first one is, many of you are acquainted with it, some of you are involved with us in a partnership in this program, and that's our Homeless Grant and Per Diem program, where we provide transitional housing and supportive services. We now have grown that program since 1998 to over 400 programs. We have 8,600 active beds today and another 2,000 beds in development. We're growing that program again this year. We added, we're spending an additional $24 million this year to further grow that program. And that program has been a highly successful program in reaching, and many of you are involved in that, and we thank you for that. Our health care for homeless veterans, we have outreach staff of our own at the VA. We have outreach staff embedded with you and your agencies. And last year, we reached 39,000 of those homeless veterans under bridges, in missions, on the street, and brought them into our programs. So without outreach and being out there and you being on the front lines with us, we would not be as successful as we have been. We have a new initiative that I want to talk about just briefly that we're excited about. We have an incarcerated veteran outreach and assessment initiative. There are 60,000 veterans coming out of just the federal and state prisons per year. We want to reach those veterans. Last year, we developed 50,000 our guidebooks to give to the prisoners coming out of the prison system so that they're acquainted with the resources that are offered, not just ours, but yours as well. This year, we've hired a number of reentry specialists in each one of our Veterans Integrated Networks, and they'll be going to the state and federal prisons. They're working with the Federal Bureau of Prisons and with the state prisons to assess patients coming out of the prison system. We know that if we link these prisoners coming out of the system with services, namely health care, primary care, substance abuse care, mental health care, case management services, that they're far more successful. And we've seen programs where the numbers of, we talked about the reincarceration rate, which is very, very high, but it's substantially reduced when we bring these services together. So we're planning to do that across the country. We hope that's a program that will grow, and we'll be doing that also in partnership with you. 12% of the veterans are homeless before they go into the federal and state prisons. So we want to make especially sure, as a homelessness prevention measure, that when they come out, that we're linking them with services. How many of you have heard of Challenge? Oh, there's a lot of hands going up here. Community Homeless Assessment, Local Education, and Network Groups. Across the country, each year at our medical centers, we meet with the local community providers to assess the needs of our homeless veterans. Last year, there were 4,400 VA and non-VA participants who collaborated in helping us plan for the services in local community. I ask you and urge you to be involved with the Challenge process locally, because that's where we get together and plan services and showcase the services that are out there for homeless veterans. And we hope that you'll participate in that. Let me summarize by saying, are these programs effective? We think they are. In VA, with our programs, we collect tons and tons of data on everything. And we collect tons and tons of data on our programs that we offer with you in the community. We did an 18-month follow-up study because we have lots of data how people are when they leave our programs. On the day they leave, we know lots about them, but we need to do more. We felt we needed to go back after people leave the program. So we followed people for 18 months after they left, and we followed a sizable number. We found that after 1 year, 80% were still housed independently. That shows that these programs work. And when we work together, we can have significant impact on improving lives. We in the VA feel that one homeless veteran is too many. We will not rest. We're in this for the long haul. We have a long-term commitment to serving the needs of homeless veterans. We'll be out there until the last homeless veteran is off the street. When we do stand-downs with you in communities across the country, we are out there, and we hope that in these stand-downs, that at some point within a few years from now, we'll give a stand-down and there'll be no homeless veterans to come to that stand-down, and that's our goal. Thank you very much.
through the Interagency Council. And as you'll see from Philip's bio in the program, it's very extensive and impressive. I'll just mention one. In 2006, he was actually named by Governing Magazine as the Public Official of the Year for 2006. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of a very impressive career and a lot of great work on the homelessness issue. So Philip and the team for the panel, please come on down, and look forward very much to hearing about the innovations that all of you have led.
Well, thanks so much, Jed. Isn't it good to be here in the White House talking about solutions to end homelessness? Can I get an amen on that? I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. I think there are a few agnostics, but I think it's a good thing to be here in the White House talking about that. And the good news is that this is no longer an uncommon activity, because, in fact, the United States Interagency Council, with cabinet secretaries such as Secretary Jackson and other cabinet secretaries, meet regularly here in the White House to make federal resources more available and more accessible to homeless people. And that's resulted, as Secretary Jackson rightly said, not only in more resources simply from HUD, but in fact in resources from across a variety of federal agencies, more resources from Washington than ever before, targeted to our homeless neighbors. That's a good thing. And we're glad to be here with you all today. Some of you all couldn't make it, actually. There's weather delays all across the East Coast, and some people who had committed to coming. In fact, I was in an airport earlier today, and they were blaming the weather for the plane being on the ground for an hour, and then 2 hours, and then a third hour. And when they came on the loudspeaker system, they said, "There's nothing we can do. This is an act of God." And I thought, wait a minute. I have to get to Washington to hear about some real acts of God in terms of what's going on behalf of our homeless neighbors. So I'm glad my plane landed, but unfortunately many didn't. So we're going to be making certain that everybody has equal access to the good information that's here. 20 years ago, this coming Sunday, President Reagan signed into law the McKinney Act. That act established a federal commitment to homelessness in resources and created the Interagency Council on Homelessness. And we're pleased to have with us in this room today some of the people who are instrumental in making that happen. Both Maria Foscarinas is here and Mary Ellen Holmes, who's on my staff, who are instrumental voices in precipitating not only the development of, but the signing of that act, along with people like Mitch Snyder and Michael Stoops and others. So we're very glad to have you. Thanks for coming, Maria. We appreciate it. It is a commemoration. We wish we could say it's a celebration, but it's only a commemoration. We will celebrate when homelessness actually is abolished in our country, of course. As you know, President Bush revitalized the council 5 years ago, and since then, we've been constellating a national partnership which includes every level of government and elements of the private sector on this issue of homelessness. The work of the council and that partnership has been to change the verb of homelessness in our country. After 20 years of managing the crisis, our collective intent now is ending the disgrace. And we recognize that no one level of government, no one element of the private sector can get that done alone. So 20 federal agencies are partnered, meeting in this building regularly. Some of those agencies weren't around when the McKinney Act was passed, and some of them weren't partners in it. Now all 20 agencies. And certainly HUD's commitment, evidenced by Secretary Jackson and Mayor Young today, and Mark Johnston, from who's now a Deputy Assistant Secretary at HUD, that's certainly an evidence of the continuing commitment of HUD on this issue, as is a range of other federal departments, most notably Health and Human Services, whose Secretary Mike Leavitt is now the Cabinet Chair of the Council, and Veterans Affairs, and Labor and Social Security, Agriculture, Education are partnered, including the Faith-Based and Community-Based Initiatives Office. When I met with Jay Hine, as Jed rightly said a few months ago, and asked that one of these roundtables be sponsored by the White House to be focused on homelessness to commemorate the 20th anniversary, he agreed on the spot. And the Faith-Based Office has been a consistent champion of efforts around homelessness. So to Jim Toohey and to Jay and to Jed, and I think you have to have a name that begins with J, I think, to be in that office, and the staff of the faith-based office, we're certainly grateful for the efforts that they've been making on the front lines in this national partnership. Federal agencies are partnered and collaborating more than ever before, and so are states. 49 governors have partnered with us in the creation of state interagency councils that mirror the work that we're doing in Washington in bringing agencies together partnered on this issue, and in the creation of business plans and increased resources. A great example of that innovation in the states is with us today. The Kentucky Housing Corporation, under the leadership of Kentucky Governor Ernie Fletcher and led by Board Chair Don Ball and Executive Director Ben Cook, KHC is in the forefront of that creative surge in partnering with the states. Don and Ben are here with us today, as is one of their key faith-based partners, Father Bradley. So please welcome Don Ball and Ben Cook and Father Bradley. Thank you for being here. Cities are partnered with us as well, more than 300, both here in the states and in the territories, partnered through their mayors, as Mayor Young rightly said, partnered through mayors and county executives in the creation of 10-year plans. And Mayor Young's city, Augusta, adopted a 10-year plan not very long ago, and through the implementation of that plan, if the mayor were still here, he'd be bragging on the reduction in street and chronic homelessness there in Augusta, Georgia. Communities that are partnered through 10-year plans that are informed by business principles and innovations and driven by results are making a difference. More than 25 cities across our country, large and small, coast to coast, are seeing for the first time in 2 decades a visible and quantifiable decrease in chronic and street homelessness in their communities, in their neighborhoods, and in the lives of their poorest neighbors. Cost-benefit analysis, a strategic part of those 10-year plans, has become another term for compassion for homeless people. The national partnership includes not only government, but faith and private sectors as well. And 3 of our panelists today represent that innovation and partnership which has created tangible change in the lives of homeless people, literally ending their homelessness. We've come to recognize that good intentions and well-meaning programs and humanitarian gestures and punitive activities have not gotten the job done, not in any city in our country, and that it's really in keeping a good grip on those good intentions, certainly, but in the partnerships, in the innovations evidenced and implemented in 10-year plans, that's what's making a difference on the streets of our country. Reverend Faith Fowler, who is here with us, is from Detroit's Cass Community Social Services, which has for 20 years focused on its homeless neighbors, ending homelessness through jobs and housing. Sister Gloria Perez from New Jersey and Eva's Village has evolved a charitable response so common among faith communities to an initiative that is oriented to the justice of housing and stability within the context of a 10-year planning strategy. Kathy Spearman has focused her considerable talents on the lives of homeless veterans and created innovations that are consumer-driven and results-oriented. And Roxanne White, representing the public sector, bringing a long history of personal faith and private sector social service involvement, is now shaping policy for homeless people in her native, or not her native Denver, but her current city of Denver, working in concert with her mayor, Mayor John Hickenlooper, through their 10-year plan, which not only is creating results on the streets of Denver, but has a big role for faith communities and is a national model in a city partnering with the faith communities. Each of these panelists does much more than they'll be reporting on today in their respective communities. We've asked them to concentrate on the innovations and the partnerships that are ending people's homelessness. So we're very glad to have them here with us, and we're eager to hear their innovations so that we can steal those ideas, as was said earlier. I call it the art of legitimate larceny. We can steal those ideas and bring them back to our communities and implement them. So let's bring, right on the heels of this good report from Veteran Affairs, let's hear from Kathy Spearman first. Kathy?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mangano. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm going to give you a quick backdrop so you know some of what. It's very difficult to have a passion and somebody to tell you to limit it to 5 minutes. So we'll see what I can do. And I'm going to have some notes here so that I can, plan this out. Wanted to say first that we are affiliate of the larger Volunteers of America that you might know, our national organization that I'm very proud to be a part of. We are a statewide Florida organization, and the emphasis that we put is on individuals and with special needs, and we focus on housing and health and employment now. Employment is something that we've added in the last 3 years, and so that's a big emphasis is getting people jobs. We find that that's really what we need to do to make people more independent. We are known for our combination of multiple funding sources to get jobs done, and that'll lead us into one of the reasons that we ended up doing a couple of our projects, how we were called upon to do that because we weren't afraid of mixing the funding and stepping out of the box and trying some new ideas. And I'd also like to just say, as part of the backdrop, is that we are a major homeless provider in the state of Florida, and HUD and the VA are long-term, very, very good partners with us, and so we've done some very exciting things with Mark's office and with Grant and Per Diem and with Phil as well. And so we're very, very proud of that. So we're one of those stories, those success stories, and I know sometimes different communities have a little bit more difficulty with that, but in Florida we've really done some very great things together with our partners. The focus today is going to be, I also want to say that we're part of homeless coalitions and continuum of cares, as you might know, with those funding sources. I'm going to focus on 2 projects very quickly that are very popular and people like to hear about them, so I'll tell you briefly about them. In Florida, we do have a good number of homeless veterans. It used to be 18,000 to 20,000, and it's going down, just as it is across the country. And I might just say that the warm climate attracts homeless veterans in Florida, and our rural areas, like our islands and our national forest and our Everglades, are places that veterans congregate in the state of Florida, at least. I want to the two projects that some of you might have even heard of are our outreach program with our mobile service center that was funded through the VA, and also something that came out of that which is a particular housing design and project. So let me tell you first about the mobile service center. It's a 43-foot self-contained mobile clinic with exam rooms, dental chair and equipment, and satellite capacity that can hook up with VA hospital. That was made possible by a VA partnership, and I have to say that the idea came from a group of people that worked within the VA system. We didn't know how we were going to fund it, but they kept looking for somebody that might be statewide that also might, just sort of step out there and try to do something really different in terms of outreach. So we got a group of people together, veterans, non-veterans, so social service agencies, and we worked together for a couple of years trying to design a project that would be outstanding, and have had a lot of fun developing it, but it is just an absolute marvelous kind of outreach that we've been doing. The concept planning was with the VA, the funding through the Grant and Per Diem program, the local vision there, the staffing from the VA periodically. VBA was usually, Veterans Benefits Administration was usually on the vehicle when we were out, and the hospital always sent some medical staff, and still does periodically. The uses are for rural and island outreach, stand downs, health fairs, hurricane disaster. Let me just tell you quickly the rural and island outreach is, Key West was one of our pilots for where we were going to start doing the mobile outreach, and we were also going to do a lot of outreach out on the islands. And so we did that and developed some housing down there. But we actually took boats out with the Marine Patrol and left little packages around to tell people that this was going to be on the mobile unit was going to be there for their services and what time and so forth, and then we have to build up. The impact of that has been locating veterans, services on site to build that kind of trust, and leveraging local dollars, and it also shows us where the veterans are. The other project is our Cabins in the Woods, and this came from doing outreach with the Mobile Service Center in the Ocala National Forest and the forest right around there. And that was also funded through the VA Grant and Per Diem program, and it's 32 units. But the uniqueness of it, it was designed by veterans, and it's 32 efficiency units that are fourplexes, and each veteran has their own entrance, their own screen porch. It's pet friendly. It's in a wooded setting for those who are coming out of the woods. That feels more comfortable. It's out on the edge of town. Nothing is shared, and they're very little, unique little cabins. Jobs are created. The contractor, condition for the contractor was that he would hire veterans to help build the veteran housing, and so that's been an agreement, and we're doing the training to get them ready for that. The status of the project is starting construction as we speak. This was funded by the Grant and Per Diem, but we also, allowed us to leverage that money with local community partnership to now have some land to do permanent housing and also some home ownership. So that's been a really nice partnership, and it's had a great impact on that community, and we're looking forward to doing this periodically all through the state, and so we're excited about that.
Thanks
and
so much.
you're going to see more from us. We're going to do more innovative things, so we'll be back talking about those kinds of things.
Thanks so much, Kathy.